Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. Today we're going to go over the top 16 Gohan superhero list that managed to squeak into the top cut of the Australian National Tournament. If you guys watched my video yesterday talking about the top 5 rogue decks that I wanted to recommend to you, this was one of those decks. I know a lot of people kind of hyped up Gohan as it came out of Fighter's Ambition. I still think it's the best archetype out of Fighter's Ambition, but that's not saying all that much considering it didn't do so hot at the other national tournaments. But this very build was constructed by my teammate in Australia, Jack, and it was piloted by his friend Mark Key, who again managed to get into the top cut of Australian Nationals with it. And I do think there's a lot of truth what Jack says, and Jack says that, this is a very tough deck to play perfectly, and I think that's because it's not the most forgiving deck. Like, you're very limited on the amount of energy you can play with, as well as the amount of cards you can have in hand at certain points of the game. So I think it does take a lot of dedication, a lot of practice, maybe more so than the amount of time we've had with Fighter's Ambition Legal, and maybe over time this deck will become better because people will learn how to use it better. But yeah, I'm going over this profile. Obviously, it's hard for me to link up with people in Australia because the time difference is so vast, but I do have notes from Jack about this deck that he built, so we will go over those throughout the video. I'll try to get you guys the best understanding possible of this deck. And again, if you guys watched the Rogue video from yesterday and you were looking for a blue Gohan build, well, here you go, constructed by one of our very own teammates. But anyways, if you guys are new here though, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And of course, if you guys want to help support the channel and you're looking to buy any cards for this deck or any trading cards for that matter, it does really help me out if you were to use my link in the description to TCG Player. Anyways, let's get right on into it. Quickly going over the leader. On both sides, you have the permanent where you can only have up to 3 energy. Again, you're a very fast, aggressive deck, but you're not able to, charge past 3. Then we have the auto draw a card, very standard amongst most leaders. Awaken, when it likes to 4 or less, or you have a Z battle card with energy cost of 2 in play, you can awaken and then go down to 5 life. What's really important is you want to attack on your unawakened side before awakening because you net an extra draw that way. You don't want to awaken before attacking on your unawakened leader if you can help it. Then we have the awakened leader. When you charge a blue card to your Z energy, you untap a regular energy and then activate main / battle. You can draw until you have 3 cards in hand. So typically you're going to combo a lot on your attacks and then refill your hand up to 3 cards, and that's how you're going to press for a lot of damage. We'll talk more about that later though with Jack's notes. But anyways, going into the main board, we have 4 copies of Piccolo the Infiltrator and 4 copies of Pan Glimpse of Talent, both serving as an excellent turn 1 play. Piccolo fetching Pan from the deck, or simply just playing Pan to draw a card, and then that Pan will serve as a great Z energy for later on, because you do want Z energy to get your turn to awaken with your Z battle card. But yeah, Piccolo, obviously it's incredibly good in Crimson, it's incredibly good in this deck, setting up, playing Pan, drawing a card for a Z energy, or just giving a barrier to play around your opponent's various interruptions. And then we have Gohan Wrathful Awakening. So another very cheap dual attacker, and that's kind of the name of the game with this deck, is very cheap, low to the ground dual attackers. Simply give your opponent the Pan, which is, this probably is the only deck where that effect will actually be pretty relevant. But yeah, give your opponent the Pan, then bottom deck it to play Gohan, and then you're able to get rid of another threat that they have on the board, and then swing for a 19k dual attack. And you could have played all these cards plus the Z battle card on turn 2, which is where you're swinging for a lot of damage. It's very important to realize, which Jack pointed out in his notes, you have 5 energy to play with on turn 2 typically, with your awaken as well as your leader's auto to restand an energy when you charge a blue Z energy, right? So very, very aggressive, very fast, very hard hitting. Then we have 4 copies of Vegeta Daily Diligence. This is the only superhero cantrip we're playing. There is also the Goku Daily Diligence. He simply draws a card, but we want Vegeta here to search out our specific aggressive threats, like the Infiltrator and like Gohan Wrathful Awakening. The cool thing too is he has Activate Battle for a blue. You can just play him simply and then just activate his auto. And that's really important because sometimes you will have the excess energy on your opponent's turn if you comboed a card and made a Z energy. And that's one really important thing to note about an aggro deck like this, is that you don't really want to play with leaving energy open either on your turn or your opponent's turn. You want to get all the value possible out of your energy as often as you can, and that's just a really nice thing about Daily Diligence's Activate Battle, is that if you do end up having an excess energy, you can use it during your opponent's turn and still get value out of that. Really, really good effect there. Then we have 4 copies of Goku Interplanetary Training. This is very important to note. I always want to make a point of this. This card has been errated. This is a super combo of the deck, but it is not a 5k combo. It is a 10k combo. So it's very important to note, just for anyone who maybe hasn't heard of the errata or hasn't seen it or is new to this deck, right? But yeah, searchable off of Vegeta Daily Diligence, which is incredible. And then as long as you have either the appropriate amount of Z energy or a Z battle card in play, this is going to be a 10k and a draw 1. Then we have 4 copies of Gohan Power Unshackled. I know in earlier builds Jack was playing less copies of this card, but it is one of your better defensive options because once you're kind of in your 3-card roulette, comboing your whole hand, drawing 3 cards, you do want to make sure that you have some assurances during your opponent's turn. And this guy's pretty hard to play around. Like, your opponent has to sacrifice a battle card that costs 2 or less in order to swing with their other battle cards, and not all decks are really playing that many low cost battle cards. Like, Sin and Gogeta can kind of do it, but they want to get value out of their 1-drops in other ways. Like, Sin wants to sacrifice Oceanus to give barrier, or sacrifice Haze to give crit. They don't really want to bottom deck them to attack through this card. And then there's Crimson, which also plays a decent amount of 1-drops that can get through this. But what's funny is a lot of Crimson's 1-drop have barrier, so they actually cannot choose those battle cards to get around Power Unshackled. That's a really interesting and important interaction to point out. Then we have 3 copies of Goku and Vegeta Immortal Rivalry. So again, like I mentioned earlier, the name of the game with this deck is low to the ground dual attackers, but also comboing high on attacks. And Goku and Vegeta Immortal Rivalry lets us do that. And since we're going to be comboing a lot and drawing 3, we want to make sure we get the dead cards out of our hand. We haven't seen any dead cards yet, and by dead I mean cards you can't really combo with, but there are cards that serve that purpose later in the deck profile where this card can actually discard those cards and turn them into combo power essentially, which is definitely really important. And then we have 2 copies of Gohan Piccolo Heroic Team. So basically, if you manage this properly and set this up correctly in the proper sequence, you can actually end up turning your leader into more of like a draw 4 per turn instead of a draw 3 per turn, because this card can draw a card when he attacks. So you want to make sure you're doing that in the proper sequence. Make sure you use your leader refuel, and then get the additional draw with the Piccolo Heroic Team to keep your hand size as maxed out as possible. Then we have 4 copies of Shu Delusion Power and 4 copies of Spring Kai of Time, Guardian of Space Time. These are just combo power. These are just basically 0 energy 10k combo cards that allow us to hit hard and big. According to Jack, you don't want to hit any less than 25k when you're attacking with battle cards. So if you can, you want to be comboing up to that number, because if you think about it in terms of game fundamentals, 25k, if your opponent does not want to take that requires them to use a super combo as well as 1 additional 5k to get out of that. So when you're burning through your opponent's super combos as fast as this deck can do it, you're going to be in a pretty good spot aggressively. Then we have 4 copies of Vegeta Savior of the Future and 4 copies of Goku Black Mortals Begone. So these are just kind of our additional blue support that help with what the deck wants to do. They are both 1-cost double strikers. Vegeta also takes a life, so you get a little bit more card advantage. But Goku Black just draws a card, so that also gives you card advantage. These both replace themselves. They both hit for double strike. And again, if you're comboing constantly, whether it's super combos or Spring Kai of Time or Shu, you're just getting to huge numbers, and you're putting your opponent in really bad spots where you're going to force them to take damage they don't want to take. If it's early on in the game, again, like your turn 2, and you've pushed them down to 4 life, and you swing with either of these double strikers and combo up to about 40k, they're probably going to take it that early in the game. So that's kind of the thing you want to be doing with this deck. Then we have 2 copies of SS3 Tag Team Trunks. This is a really cool overrun for this deck that, again, I got to give credit to Jack for this. A really cool find, because this card's been very interesting throughout the game's history, but very difficult to use because warping a card from hand to get a double strike crit through where you probably still have to combo on top of it because 15k is not really all that big. It's been very hard to utilize in this game, but this deck does it perfectly because, again, you're comboing on attacks so frequently that you're going to get this thing up to about 25 or even maybe 40k. And then, like I was talking about with Goku and Vegeta Immortal Rivalry, you're going to be able to warp dead cards out of your hand, meaning cards you cannot combo with, which is going to help you, refill your hand and cycle through more of your deck and do all that good stuff. So yeah, really cool card in this deck. Very interesting tech. And then we have 1 copy of Mirror Creator Absorbed. If you've pushed your opponent down to that last life and they are basically out of resources for defending themselves, this is kind of like the guaranteed game. But this is another kind of example of a quote-unquote dead card I was talking about, where if it's a card you can't really combo with, cool, get it out of your hand with Trunks, get it out of your hand with Vegeta or Immortal Rivalry. That is totally an option that you have. 1 copy of Champa, obviously for double strike game finishes. And then we have the Gohan Beast SCR. Burn them for that last life, or burn them for one of the last couple lives. Send their whole board back to their hand, and then just untap anything you need to that can just help you push for game. Which a really cool target for that is actually Mirror Creator Absorb, because his auto to gain power per card in your warp is not once per turn. So let's say your Mirror gains 70k on the first attack, you restand it, swing with it again, it'll gain 70k more on that second attack, which is kind of wild. But yeah, that's the main deck. Very clean, very concise ratios, and yeah, this deck is super consistent. The shortest amount of cards you can play, 50 cards, cycling through as much as you can. and seeing as many of your best cards as possible. Going down to the Z deck, we have 2 copies of Vegeta Stronger Together. This is helping limit your opponent's hand size. So if you do, get very aggressive with your opponent and pump their handful of cards, you're going to be able to reduce those cards back down to 10. And then this also allows you to kind of get around your own leader's hand size limit by warping cards and then picking them back up later, which can put you to a potential 5-card hand with, again, Piccolo and Gohan heroic team, right? But yeah, this is one of the main tools for getting Awaken. It's a 15k attacker, and then again, you're following up with Piccolo Infiltrator, Gohan Wrathful Awakening, all that kind of stuff. Then we have the 1 copy of Goku Stronger Together. What's relevant about it in this deck is that you can actually use the Activate Battle to give a character or a card with 2 characters in it triple strike. So that's relevant for, again, Goku Vegeta Immortal Rivalry or the Gohan Piccolo heroic team. Then we have 1 copy of Beerus Area Annihilator, 1 copy of Cell Awakening of the Creator, just your standard blue Z cards, 1 copy of Goku Awaken Onslaught. This deck is really good at making Z energy, so the 3 cost here is not a big deal. And again, if you are siding into these extra cards that we'll take a look at in a second, you can discard them and give this guy critical, as well as draw a card, cycle a bit more through your deck. And then we have 1 copy of SSB Vegeta Surmounting the Impossible, another way to get dead cards out of your hand, but also if you need to take that life, see more cards, this is the option for you to do that. And then for the sideboard, again, very clean, concise ratios, but all these cards do work wonders in this deck. So we have 4 copies of Decisive Strike. This deck is revolving around playing Z battle cards as often as you possibly can. So having this free answer to your opponent's floodgates, whether it's Gamma, whether it's a card like Oceanus, for example, which any deck can play for the most part, this is a really good answer to your opponent's floodgates. 4 copies of Protector of the People, kind of like your anti-aggro, so probably against a mirror match, probably against Red Sin Shenron, maybe against SS4 Gogeta as well. Again, pitch cards, you're going to refill your hand anyway, and then your leader's going to get a stacking Senzu Bean. And what's cool too, or what I find interesting at least, is that there's no actual Senzu Bean in this deck. I guess you don't really need the excess energy when your leader makes it anyway by comboing cards, but I did find that kind of interesting that we're not using it for the defensive purposes here. 4 copies of Shin Noble Supremacy. I pointed this out in the video yesterday that you're always only going to have 3 energy. So this is always actually going to be a floodgate for your opponent's board. So again, the Sin matchup, the Vegito matchup, you're just always going to be able to kind of stunt them from attacking with their big guys as long as you can draw copies of this card. So this is actually a really, really strong card in this deck in particular. And then we have 3 copies of Koitsukai, which is again going to help with your aggressive pushes. You got to look at decks that play cards during your turn. Like, again, Gamma is one of those matchups. You could be looking at some rogue stuff like Red Blue Cooler. Any other types of strategies that are going to play cards during your turn, you can shut them down. Red Blue Launch might be another example. But yeah, that's the deck in its entirety. Now I'm just going to point out a few more notes that Jack left for me to tell you guys. So like I said throughout the profile, you want to be comboing to a minimum of 25k on most of your attacks as often as you can. That's going to be one of the ways you're going to get the most efficiency out of your leader refueling back to 3 cards. But that's also how you're going to do a good amount of damage to your opponent early. Now, Jack lists here that, turn 2 is not really meant to kill the opponent, but it's meant to set them up for the lethal turn 3. So a really good objective goal here on turn 2 is to get your opponent down to 2 or 1 life if you can help it. Even though they may have many cards in their hand, you're establishing such a board that's going to be hard for them to remove all in one shot, especially on a turn 2 or turn 3 for them. And then going from there, you have the options of, dumping on a Champa or even just playing your SCR and possibly burning them for the last life. And then just, swinging with your established board. And again, just comboing as much as you possibly can on that turn 3. If the game goes past turn 3, your deck can start to fall off. That's kind of where the Glass Cannon aggro strategy kind of comes from. But yeah, Jack also lists some ways that the deck is a bit weak. We'll go over those right now real quick just so you guys kind of know your own weaknesses. What Jack notes here is that the biggest weakness are decks that can apply pressure back while also being able to hold off the pressure. Sin and SS4 Gogeta are not really great at doing that. They do have their various Senzu Bean types of effects, but they don't really have turn-ending floodgates that can really stop you. You're still going to be able to attack. You're still going to be able to combo high past their Senzu Bean kind of baseline. But Crimson being able to cycle through multiple beans and just the vast amount of combo power they have, that is one of the reasons that deck can do pretty well against this deck. But again, I do think if you happen to go first and hit them really hard and really fast, you might be in a really, really good spot. But overall, guys, that's the deck. Shout out to Jack for giving me the notes to go off of, as well as Mark for taking this to a top cut finish. If you guys have any questions, drop them down below. I will definitely respond to them or try to get Jack to respond to them. Thank you guys again. I'll see you guys in the next one.